a note on a few additional challenges to sustainability. Now, I'm not going to cover all of the sustainability challenges, but these are of some note. So externalities, for those of you who don't know what externalities are, this is actually an economic term. It essentially means a side effect or cost of industrial or commercial activities that is not directly reflected in the cost of goods and services. So you could easily say that we saw an example of an externality in the case of the Atlantic cod fisheries. Perhaps the fishers paid for the boats and the equipment and all of those things that it cost to run their businesses, but they didn't necessarily pay for the carrying capacity that they were pulling out from. That was an example of an externality. There was a cost there that group of fishers, as well as consumers, did not pay for. And so then the stocks did not have enough opportunity to replenish themselves. And so then what happened? Well, eventually the fishers did pay for that cost, but not initially. Another example might be fast fashion. I think that's a good example. That's been brought up a few times in class. So if you think about fast fashion, if you think about, well, just fashion in general, how much do we pay for the clothing that we wear? And is the true cost of the clothing reflected in the price tag? Well, for example, if I think about the sweater that I'm wearing, it wasn't super cheap. I bought it online from a company that I like buying from because their clothes are, well, I like their styles, and their clothes tend to fit well, and they seem to last for quite a while. This sweater, I can't remember how much I paid for it. I bought it not too long ago. It might have been around $30, maybe with shipping and exchange rate. It was closer to $40. And I suspect that I'll have this sweater for quite some time. I wouldn't refer to it as fast fashion. I suspect it'll last me probably 5 years at least, maybe even longer. It's a very comfortable style. I quite like it. But, how many sweaters like this do I use in a lifetime, and what happens to them after I'm finished using them? Well, this particular sweater is, well, I'm not sure. I didn't check the tag, but I suspect it's a nylon rayon blend, which means that it's made probably from 100% petrochemical products. I don't think there's any cotton in here. I could be wrong. Petrochemicals, and it has these nifty little, what would you call them? They look kind of like grommets, small grommets all over it in kind of this random pattern. So metal as well. It's got quite a bit of metal in it. Where do those petrochemicals come from? Well, they might come from Venezuela or Nigeria or the oil sands, perhaps Saudi Arabia. So, what were the practices that pulled those petrochemicals out of the ground? Were there, an environmental cost? Was there a social cost? If this was extracted from Saudi Arabia, do we have to look at the international cost, where you have a rich nation state that has some human rights violations that it is allowed to perpetuate because it is wealthy because of petrochemicals? If it comes from, say, the Alberta oil sands, what is the environmental cost? What is the social cost ultimately to the people who live downstream from the oil sands, and so on and so on. And that's just the material that this is made of. And that's not the metal that it's made of, because I have no idea where that metal came from or what kind of metal it is. So I don't know about that. In any case, the metal and the petrochemicals had to then be transported somewhere. Again, more manufacturing costs for the whatever transportation device takes those materials, whether it's a ship or a truck or a train, to where it has to go, and then a manufacturing has to take place. There's going to be pollution from that manufacturing. There's going to be, again, there's going to be additional energy costs because a manufacturing plant that creates fabric, for example, can't run on air. It has to have something that powers that plant or that manufacturing facility. And then what are the social costs as well, of course. How does that manufacturing facility dispose of its waste? How does it pay and treat its employees? Well, I have no idea. I have no way really of knowing the history of this garment that I'm wearing. You know, I look at an online catalog and I think, oh, I want that one. And I click it, it goes to my cart, and then I go and I pay for it, and it shows up on my door one day. Now, if I were to think about the supply chains that got that to me, the fabric and what constitutes the fabric and its journey to me is quite complex. Petrochemicals are dug up and then they're transported. Again, more petrochemicals, more manufacturing. Then the fabric is created, and then maybe it's taken somewhere else before it's sewn into a garment, and then more petrochemicals are used in that process, because again, we need energy. Every step requires energy during manufacturing as well as transportation. How do you come up with a cost for that? Truly, a true, honest cost. Is it $30? Is it $40? Is it $100? Is it $1,000? I don't know. What is the true cost of this sweater that I'm wearing? If I calculate the cost to the people that produced it and the environment that has come under untold destruction so that I can wear this thing. So that's full disclosure. And of course, this is the problem of our times. We don't know where the majority of our possessions come from. We don't know their history, and we don't know where something comes from. It becomes very challenging to deal with these complex set of issues. And then, of course, I haven't even gotten into what happens to this after I'm finished using it. Can it be repurposed in some way? Probably not. Very unlikely. I'll probably wear it until it looks like crap, and then it'll probably go into a landfill somewhere where it will stay for hundreds or more years. And that'll be the end of that. So, externalities. What are the true costs of the possessions that we buy and that we produce? That's what externalities are all about. Okay, so from that depressing subject, let's move on to efficiency paradoxes. Efficiencies outside the context of a steady state economy, meaning a circular economy, can provoke more consumption and growth. So why would that be? If something's more efficient, why would that provoke more consumption? Well, because with efficiencies comes savings. So when we have a savings as consumers, that generally means that we use more of something. So when the price of something goes down, whether that's energy, well, I don't think energy goes down very often anymore, but I guess it does. I don't know. Anyway, anything where there's a reduction in cost, we tend to consume more. So that is the efficiency paradox. One more point here. Positive social changes don't necessarily equate to long-term sustainability. So we talk about things like a just transition, and we need to be thinking that a transition to renewable energy is just. But we can't get trapped in the idea that it is necessarily going to be easy to make it just. And we can't get trapped in the idea that it's going to be just for everyone. So who will it be just for? And who will it feel unjust for? Because if we think about it for a moment, well, okay, let's say we want to make everyone have the same lifestyle as us. Then we overshoot the carrying capacity of the planet by about 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 planets, depending upon your lifestyle. And that's not going to work very well. So who is going to have to give something up if we want to pull the poor out of poverty? There's always going to be a trade-off. So we need to remember this. Here's a really good example, the Green Revolution. So the Green Revolution, well, the Green Revolution took place over a period of approximately 20 years, from the early 50s to, the late 60s, roughly, give or take. The problem presented itself that the population was growing and we didn't have enough food to feed everyone. And, this was something that a lot of academics were talking about and worrying over and so on. Well, around this time, the emergence of cheap petrochemicals, we were developing new ways to pull more petroleum out of the ground and developing new ways to use it. The 50s were revolutionary in the use of plastics, for example, as a manufacturing material. I mean, it was incredible. Plastics were everywhere, and if you look at styles in the 50s, you'll see that, they became a thing. If you look at retro styles in the 50s, there's lots of plastics, because plastics were in. They were revolutionary. We got excited about plastics. The other thing that petrochemicals supplied us with was artificial fertilizers. So just when the soil was becoming depleted, and just when the soil needed to produce more food rather than less, we came up with artificial fertilizers based on petrochemicals. Well, that's all well and good, except that over time, petroleum products decrease soil health. They also can cause problems with oceans through agricultural runoff. They cause the collapse of soil ecosystems. We've seen plummeting insect populations over the last couple of decades from the overuse of insecticides. And we've seen a buildup of potentially toxic chemicals in the environment. So these are huge challenges that we now face as a result of the Green Revolution, which seemed really positive at the time. No one was complaining that we were able to produce so much more food through monocropping and through factory farms. We also see huge ethical issues arising from the use of factory farms. We have, the commodification. And I mean, animals, domesticated animals have always been commodified, but not to the extent that they have been in the last decades. They are warehoused, and, if you look at some of the horrors of large-scale chicken farming or large-scale pig farming, they truly are horrors. And anyone who looks at them closely, I hope, would have, some reservations about the things that take place on those kinds of factory farms. So, Green Revolution, yay, but also boo. So, positive social changes don't necessarily equate to long-term sustainability.